Alright folks, so it's been a while since I've done a bow building video, so that's what we're going to do today. I've got a couple of Osage orange billets here, and there was probably a date on these at one time, but it's not there anymore. I think I took the sapwood off. But these were probably cut in the early to mid 90s if I had to guess. Probably, I don't know, 95 maybe. But it's a really good wood. One of the things you look for in Osage is just, it just feels like a brick when you pick it up. It's just solid, dense wood. Sometimes you grab an Osage stave and it just doesn't feel like that, but these are nice, dense, hardwood. And so we are going to make a two-piece takedown self bow. And I'm going to make it in a design that I haven't really done a lot with. It's going to be a deflex, reflex type of a design, so it's more of a modern design. Any of the laminated longbows that you see these days are probably going to be that design. It's swept back in the handle, and the limbs are long sweeping curves. So first thing we need to do is get this thing to one growth ring. There's still a little bit of sapwood on here, so we'll take all that off, and then we launch into an entirely different process of actually making the takedown sleeve before we make the bow. So let's get started. So these are pretty clean pieces of wood. There's a few little pin knots in this, which aren't going to cause a problem, but they are like laser straight for Osage. So this should be a pretty straightforward process. Most of the work that I'm going to do is going to be with a drawknife, and it's not like butter knife dull, but it's definitely not sharp. I mean, I can run my finger on that and there's no risk of cutting myself. The reason I like that that kind of level of dullness is because if it's too sharp, it's easy to cut down through your rings, but if you leave it kind of semi-dull, you can actually use it more like a wedge, and you're separating the rings in this Osage. Osage is made up of late wood and early wood, and that early wood stuff is, if you look at the end, they're light colored bands, and that stuff is really crunchy, whereas the late wood is hard. And so if you use this as a kind of a wedge, you can stick it between those two hard late wood rings and kind of wedge one off the top of the other. I had a guy, I was talking about having a dull draw knife one time on a forum years ago, and I had a guy say, well, tools are supposed to be sharp. Wait, well, butter knife's a tool. It's not supposed to be sharp. So is a hammer. So if you listen, you can hear that crunch. That's that early woods layer between these two hardwood rings, and if you look right here, you can actually see it, that kind of just a crunchy layer in there, but you can see remnants of it right there. And it's definitely, you can hear it. So there's still a few bug holes right here. We're gonna have to go down another ring to get down below those. Hopefully they don't go too awful far. Alright, so this one is done. It's to one ring, just needs to be back cleaned up just a little bit. I had to go down a few more rings than I wanted to just to get below those bug holes, but we got rid of most of them. There are still a few right down at this end, but we can lay the bow out and kind of taper that so we get rid of all of those things. So Osage is one of two woods in North America that are considered to be the best bow woods. And people get caught up on that a lot. I get a lot of questions about, from new bowyers about where they need to get an Osage stave from. And I actually recommend that people don't start with Osage because the staves are expensive if you're buying them. I mean, these days you're probably not going to spend less than 150 bucks on a stave plus shipping. And so I recommend that people start with whatever they can find locally. And there's a lot of good woods in North America. There's a lot of woods that'll make really good bows. Hickory, ash, elm, all of those things will make good bows. Out west, you've got things like vine maple and serviceberry if you can find them. Hawthorn makes a good bow. Apple. So a lot of options. And then of course you got boards from Home Depot. or wherever. So this knot right here is right on the edge of the bow, so I'm going to take my draw knife and hook under some grain right here, and I'm going to come down and just pop that knot right out, and hopefully we have enough width left. Pop out as good as I wanted it to. So that's 1.25 inches wide. It's a little bit narrower than I would have wanted, but we can make that work. So what we're going to do here is we're going to make a tenon and socket for this bow handle to pop in and out of. It's a very precise procedure, because if it's not just right, if the tenon's not just right, it won't come out and all that stuff. That'll all make sense when we put this thing together. So we can adjust this angle here to either give the bow back set or deflex, which we'll end up doing here in just a minute. Kick it back a little more than that. This tenon is the critical part. It's got to have some taper. But if you have too much taper, the bottom limb will just fall out of the bow if it's not strung. If you don't have any taper, or it actually gets bigger from here to here, once the handle cures, it won't be a two-piece. You'll just make a one-piece out of it again. And so being very meticulous with the measurements on this is important. It's also important that there's not any little dips or anything like that in there. That'll also catch and won't allow it to come out. That's the good stuff right now. Okay, West Systems, what's up with my pump here? So my pump's not working. So we're just gonna have to, I think it's a 1 to 5. Just gonna have to drizzle some in here till it looks like it's about 1/5. We'll go with that. Maybe it'll work. So there's a couple of things I'm doing with this. One, I'm gonna coat this whole tenon, because one of the problems with these bows with this type of a system is that if you're traveling in different areas and you go from low humidity to high humidity, the wood will react with the environmental moisture or the humidity, and wood swells. So sometimes if you go to a high humidity area, you can't get your bow apart or can't get it back together. So this is going to help to seal it up. And then also we're going to put a cap on this piece right here just to protect it. If you ever drop this and it hits right here, it'll split off, but if you put a cap on there to protect it, then it won't do that. There you go. So we'll just let that dry and then come back and finish it off. Alright, so I just let this cure overnight, and we're going to go ahead and just kind of zip the back of this off and then fit this face piece to our tenon there, and then we'll make sure everything's smooth. And then we get to do the fun stuff. Check, 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 and check again. If this is not done, if this piece right here isn't right, all this work is down the drain. So this is going to sit inside of a fiberglass sleeve, and if there's just a little tiny little dip like this or this, that glass is so rigid that it just will not pop out. You'll glue the bow back together permanently. Just trying to get this, I just put a little super glue in that. There was just a tiny little void right there I was trying to fill in. I was just trying to get this super glue to kick off so I can keep going. Don't have to sit and wait on it. Well, we'll put a couple coats of this stuff on there, and then we'll start trying to put this thing together. So this is my customized jig for putting the handle, or for putting these bows together. I think Walmart might carry these actually in their outdoor department. You have to go up to the front desk and ask them. This is a very refined piece of equipment right here. So this is the part of this whole process. It is the most time-consuming pain in the butt. You're dealing with pieces of wood that are not square, and they want to roll on you, and you got to get everything just right. And once you get it just right, you can't move it. So the easiest way to do these handles is with this, they call it fiberglass tape. It's just 1 inch wide strips of glass. We'll coat this in that epoxy resin and use this to wrap our handle. So we need to spray this with some of this mold release. This is like a, I don't know what it is, Teflon or something maybe? Silicone? Probably silicone. Spray this on this so we can slide it out of our tenon once it cures. This stuff actually works pretty good too if you're shooting 3D targets. You spray this stuff on your arrow, things slide right out of there. So I used to make these handles with polyester resin, like the stuff that you can pick up at, I think you can get it at Ace Hardware and different places. Probably get it at Napa. The polyester resin doesn't bond to the wood very good, and it's just not very easy to work with. And then I used a thicker epoxy, EA40, which is a pretty popular bow building epoxy. If you make like laminated bows, EA40 is used a lot. But this West system, I've never used it for this before, but I've used it on boats, and it flows and wets out the fiberglass much easier than that EA40 does, and it sticks to the wood way better than the polyester resin does. Just a better all-around product. So this West Systems epoxy comes with, you can either get a fast hardener or a slow hardener depending on the temperature. And I ordered this stuff in the winter time, so I got the fast hardener. So hopefully it doesn't kick off too fast. I think we'll have plenty of time. Once you start laying glass on here, it's very important to not move these things because they're lined up right now. If you get halfway through with this, or you get all your glass wrapped and then you bump this thing, you're going to create an air pocket in there and your fit's not going to be very good. So what we're doing here is we're just going to keep laying glass on this. We're going to keep wrapping this thing until we build up. It's going to be a big ball of glass and epoxy wrapped around there, and from that ball we'll shape our handle out of that. Trying to get a little bit of a hurry here because I can feel that epoxy getting hot. It'll heat up when it's starting to kick off and start to gel a little bit. Once that happens, once it starts to gel, you might as well just toss that batch and mix up a new one. And that's one of the reasons you want to mix it in small batches. You don't want to mix this stuff in a big batch because that actually makes it heat up faster. You have less working time, so if you work in small batches, you got a little more time. All right, so that's cured out. So now we can just grind this down and grind that into shape. And then once we get it ground down, we'll go ahead and pop this bottom limb right out of this thing. And hopefully it comes out without any issue. Sometimes they can be a real pain though. So this part can kind of freak people out a little bit because it will crack like loudly when you pop it loose. There we go. There you have it. Two-piece. It's another highly specialized piece of bow building equipment right there. Starting to look like a bow. One note on this glass, I should be wearing a respirator. I know I'll get comments about that. And if I was doing this all the time, I would be wearing a respirator. So, don't be like me, wear a respirator. So the tips on this bow, the stave is pretty straight, so I'll use a straight edge to draw the limb tips on here. If you've got some character in your stave and it kind of does some whoop-de-doos, there's a different way, and I've shown that in other videos, how to kind of follow those curves. I'm just taking this sharp edge off where the back meets the side here. So I'm gonna go ahead, while I've got this on this back set form, I'm gonna go ahead and heat treat the belly. We'll just heat it for about 20 minutes, and that's gonna help harden the belly side, make it more resilient, more spring back to its original shape a little quicker. All right, so this thing is coming together nicely. Got the sweeps for the limbs. They're both matched really nice. Everything's lined up. I'm gonna go ahead and just put this back on a different form here and just put some slight recurves, not full recurves, just kind of reflex the tips just a little bit before we start tillering this thing. If I'm putting tight recurves in a bow's tips like this, I try to avoid heating the belly side because that's under tension. You put a bunch of heat on this belly side when it's under tension like this, you can cause it to open up cracks. And you can still crack it like this, which is fine, it's not a big deal. You can usually sand those cracks out. But if you heat it from the sides, it helps to avoid that. Getting there. Alright, so we're moving right along with this bow. I went ahead and just took a little bit more wood off the belly side of this thing and shortened the string just a tiny little bit. So we're gonna go ahead and see if we can get it strung up and then see what it looks like. Not bad. So the bottom limb, if you look down that, the top limb's got a lot more curve to it, and if you look at where the curve is, a lot of it's right in here. So what we'll end up doing is taking a little more wood off this bottom limb and then off the outside of this top limb here. And the other thing you can look at is the measurement from right outside your fade from the belly to the string. So if I put my fist in there, you can see the difference. You know, we're probably 1/4, 3/8 difference. Most bows you want a little bit, it's called positive tiller, you want a little bit more gap here than here, but not that much. That's a lot. So the process we're about to launch into is called tillering, and this is where the experience in bow building comes into play, because you got to be able to look at and find those subtle differences. Ideally what we're shooting for is that the stress to be distributed over the whole limb. And so if you have one area that's doing more work or bending more, every time you shoot, that area has to work a little harder than the rest of the bow, and eventually the rest of the bow will overpower it, and that is called a hinge. That'll just get worse and worse over time and eventually just make the bow unshootable. And so we want a nice smooth curve all the way up and down this limb. You wouldn't think that that would do much, these little paper thin shavings, but they do, especially as you get towards your final draw weight. Just taking off as little as 3 or 4 little scrapes like that can change the way the bow bends. And so this is the top limb, and I've got this marked where it was bending a little too much, or where it was bending the most, which is right in here. So we're just going to come take wood on off the outer part. This stuff makes good fire starter. So the knock on this string is just a little big for the knock on this bow. So I'm gonna close it up a little bit, just wrapping some serving around it, the bottom. See how these tips need to be aligned a little bit. You can see the string's kind of off to that side just a little bit. So what we can do is heat this part of the limb, just twist this thing, and it'll line those tips up. This one's off a little bit too. Just hold it for a few minutes till it kind of doesn't have to be completely cool, but cooler than you need to be able to put your hand on it comfortably. How this looks depends a lot on the angle that you're looking at it, and so it might be a little bit difficult to see on the camera, but if you get right at my perspective, look at it straight on, and when I bend this, you can see that there's a lot of bend kind of inside, and that makes it, that's where most of the stress is. These are your levers, right? Your limbs act as levers, and so the farther you get away from that fulcrum, I guess, the more pressure is going to be applied. And so to relieve some of the pressure here, we need to take more wood off the outside, get that bending, get that rolling over a little bit better. You can see the outsides, like the outer 2/3 of those limbs are not bending at all. They're just like, they're pretty stiff. So what I'm looking at is there's a lot of bend right there, a lot of bend right there. Everything aside from those areas needs wood taken off. You can tiller the bow with it strung like this, but if you're going to do this, you need to be very careful with your scraper, because it's back here at the tips. It's real easy to nick your string. If you cut your string, it's going to jab you in the gut and feel not good. This one limb's got a little bit of deflex that was just in the stave to start with, and that's making it look like it's bending more than it actually is. And so we're just going to fix that with a little bit of heat. That's 28 inches, that's 65 pounds, and that's as far as my Tillering rack goes. And so typically these bows will gain 2.5 to 3 pounds per inch of draw length at that portion of the draw curve, if you want to get super nerdy about it. So this thing should be drawing 68 at 29, which is what my draw length is. And it'll drop a few. I want to leave it a little heavy because just through the next few months of shooting this bow, it'll probably drop, I'm guessing, maybe 4 pounds or so, which will bring it more in line with what I really want. That's a moose killing machine right there. This freaks people out too. I don't cut the shelf all the way in to start with. I just cut it a little ways in to see how it's lining up. You can see it's a little deeper in the back than the front. So this is just beeswax that you would put on your string, but you rub a little bit of that on this tenon and it'll take care of all that noise. So I'll just stick a temporary strike plate and piece of shelf material on here. Just a piece of Velcro. Alright, so this thing is done, it's shooting. I like the way it shoots. Now there's just a lot of sanding to get this thing finished off and just working your way down through different grits of sandpaper and then seal it off and it should be ready to go. So I'll bring y'all back when this is all finished off and sealed and then we'll go shoot a little bit. So we're gonna stain this bow with something called Aqua Fortis, and this is something that Dan Santana had actually recommended. I've never tried it before, so we're just gonna see what it looks like. Take the coolest clip ever. So this bow turned out really nice. Everything's lined up good. The tenon fits really nice. No wobble at all. So I colored this bow, or stained this bow, with something called Aqua Fortis, and it's something that we actually had a little bit left over from a muzzleloader that I helped my son build, and it's nitric acid, I think, or nitric acid and iron maybe. But you put it on there and it looks kind of just gray and green. It doesn't look very good, but once you let it dry and put a little heat on it, the color changes and you end up with something like this. At least for Osage, the color would vary with different types of wood, but I like it. It looks really good. It makes it look like this Osage has got some age on it, even though it's a newly constructed bow. And then put a little beaver tail handle wrap on here. if you look up Big Jim's Bow Company on YouTube, he's got a really good video on how to do this. You basically wet it and use contact cement to kind of form it to the bow handle, and then do a baseball stitch on the back there. And the last thing is I put a little tack right there in the handle, and that works as kind of a mental trigger. And I've done, if you look at my shooting and tuning playlist, there's some stuff on there about that. I just went ahead and put a little Velcro shelf on there, and then a Velcro strike plate, and that's what I usually do on most of the bows that I make. So this bow is drawing a little over 60 pounds at 29 inches, and the bow that I've been shooting is a little over 50 at 29. Come here. So this one's shooting, when I just shot probably at this distance. With my other bow I would have hit, you know, maybe 4 inches above the bottom of the chest, and with this bow I was probably 10 inches. Not too bad. What do you think, Cedar? You like it? Yeah, Cedar approves.